So 19 of you are already here. 2 minutes before we start. How's everyone doing? No responses. Okay, there we go. Now the responses are coming in. Yeah, I'm doing well as well. What are some of your hacks going to be about if you know that already? Yeah, ready to do some ACID transactions? Good one. If you don't know what ACID transactions are, I will briefly go over that. There's only so much you can do in half an hour, but I will go over what transactions are. Yes, Walid has already noticed that goose over there, right over there. That's a Waterloo goose. So in in-person Hack the North, they used to give those out as well. All right, it's 4. Let's think about getting started. Okay, so if you want to follow along with these slides as I'm talking, sometimes I might go faster than you'd like. Sometimes I'd go slower than you'd like. Go to that link that's at the bottom of the slide, cockroach.ch/htn-talk-slides, and you should see this exact same slide deck. Feel free to go faster than me. Feel free to go slower than me. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat on the side. Yeah. So since some of you might be watching this on YouTube Live, note that I may not be tracking YouTube Live for questions as much as I'm tracking Hopin. So if you can go to my.hackthenorth.com/schedule and then join the Hopin chat, that is a bit more efficient. But I'll try to watch both. Give it another minute or two. Okay, the number of attendees has climbed pretty steadily. So I think I'll get started because I'll need the full half an hour. All right, so welcome to the Cockroach Labs talk. And here I'm going to introduce you to Cockroach Cloud, which is the cloud offering of CockroachDB. What is CockroachDB? Well, I'll be getting into that in just a moment. But before that, a quick intro of myself. My name is Bilal. I have attended every Hack the North in human history, except for 2018, which is one of the bigger regrets of my life. But they've all been amazing. I've enjoyed them. I've attended them as a hacker, as a mentor, and the community is excellent. You may not be here in person, but take full advantage of it while you're here. Chat with other hackers, chat with sponsors, chat with us. We have a virtual booth. So now for the topic of the conversation. What is CockroachDB? We are a distributed SQL database. I will be defining all those terms shortly in the next half an hour. I also graduated from Waterloo from the software engineering program 2 years ago. With that said, let's move along. So what is a database? Well, why do you need a database? So a lot of applications that you're going to build are going to look somewhat like this. They are going to have the 3-tier structure, which is what we call it. They might have a front end, which could be a web front end, a mobile front end. They'll have some sort of backend services. They could be just a web backend, or it could be a bunch of microservices. And they're going to have a data layer. Obviously, your application does not need to follow this exact path, but the chances are you're going to have to store a lot of data. You're going to have to store, you're going to have to retrieve that data. You want your data to be stored both reliably as well as efficiently when you want to retrieve it. And what do we mean by reliably? You want your data to be able to survive crashes. You want your data to be consistent in how you write to it and read from it. I will be defining what I mean by consistent shortly. But most importantly, because you're in a hackathon, you want to be able to do this efficiently and quickly as possible with the least amount of headaches, with the least amount of like setup and tear down time. Because 36 hours is not that much time to like play around with Linux servers and deploy badly, I guess, like documented databases on machines that you may not be very familiar with. Not to like put anyone else down, but I guess like what you want is you want to be able to store and retrieve data efficiently with like a top tier database with as little legwork as possible, and Cockroach Cloud is going to be your solution to that. And let's say your hackathon project really takes off and you get millions of users next week. You want your data layer to be scalable. You want it to be able to handle those millions of users, or you want it to be able to handle the 10 users you are going to get on day one. So Cockroach can answer both problems. So I mentioned a little bit about obviously what a database is, but also about scalability and consistency. So let me define consistency again. Consistency, when we talk about databases, usually means that, like, let's say when you do a write to a database and then you read from it right after that, you will get the most recent write. This might seem to make sense in general, but there are a lot of databases that do not guarantee that because it delivers better performance and it delivers better scalability. You can scale across multiple machines if you get rid of the ability to guarantee this. So the third row in this table, which is comparing different types of databases, the transactions layer, that is talking about consistency. So relational databases, which are on the left, which is your bread and butter, classic but very like battle tested databases like MySQL, Postgres, Oracle. These would fall in the relational category, and CockroachDB is also relational, except it does more than just the relational databases. Do more on that in just a bit. So there's the middle category of databases, the NoSQL databases like MongoDB, Cassandra, CouchDB. These started coming around the late 2000s, early 2010s, and they did not guarantee consistency, but they guaranteed really good scalability and higher write performance at the expense of consistency, which made it really hard to write applications because you had to like try to guarantee that like whatever you were reading was actually the most recent write, and you could not do transactions. And what a transaction is it's a set of operations that either all applies or none of it applies. So a very simple example of a transaction would be take off like $500 from person A and add $500 to person B's account. You either want both to happen or you want neither to happen. You don't want to create money out of thin air. You do not want to lose money. In a database like CockroachDB, like Postgres, you can do that pretty easily. Both of them can be part of the same transaction, but NoSQL databases cannot do that. So CockroachDB gives you the scalability of NoSQL databases, and it gives you the consistent transactions of relational databases. So it is really the best of both worlds. I've gone through a little bit of this already, but Cockroach allows you to scale, and it is very survivable. So our slogan is scale fast, survive everything, thrive everywhere. The reason why it's called CockroachDB is because cockroaches are really hard to kill. And for you, it is really easy to use. It is very resilient, and it is compatible with all Postgres client tools, or most Postgres client tools at least, because it speaks the same client protocol as Postgres. You can go to cockroachlabs.com/customers to see how many big companies use us. Yeah, I will see if we have any questions so far. No questions so far. Feel free to drop them in the chat if you have any. I'll keep moving right along. So I will be going into SQL in this presentation as well, but here's an example of how you would use a SQL database. So like, let's say you run that create table query at the top, and that will just create a table customers with 3 columns, ID, name, and country. The ID column is an integer, and the name and country columns are strings. And in this example, this table only has 3 rows, but we're going to build a very similar table like this later on in this presentation using a running Cockroach Cloud cluster that we will connect to in this workshop. So I will leave this presentation and come back to it. But yeah, more on the basics of SQL later. But the point that I want you to take away from this is that relational databases, this is how they look under the hood, or like at least from the perspective of the application. What you're dealing with is tabular form data, the style you're probably familiar with in Excel spreadsheets, except much more powerful, because you can interact with it in SQL, you can make complex queries. Yeah, with that said, let's start, setting up Cockroach Cloud. So before we, I guess, get into the cloud side of CockroachDB, it is important to note that you can just download CockroachDB. It is source available, and you can run it on your own laptop. It is free to use. You can just go to cockroachlabs.com, download it, and run it on whatever you want. So that is option 1. But the option 2, which is what I've been talking about so far, is Cockroach Cloud. It is a managed offering of CockroachDB, and you can just in like 5 minutes you can get a cluster in Google's cloud infrastructure, except you don't have to worry about managing any of that because we do it for you. You can get a production tier database running in the cloud. So if you want to sign up for Cockroach Cloud, go to that URL, cockroachlabs.cloud/signup, and use your email address if you are a student of U Waterloo, Queen's, or UOIT/Ontario Tech. If you are not a student of any of those 3 universities, or do not have a teammate who goes to those universities and therefore has one of their email addresses, go to that other link, which is cockro.ch/htn-signup, and that'll take you to a Google form where you can request a cluster from us, and one of us will have to manually go and create a cluster for you. So with that said, the rest of this presentation is just going to be me creating a Cockroach Cloud cluster and interacting with it. So if you have the slides downloaded, you should just be able to see a sequence of screenshots where I go through that process. But since I have you on here right now, I'm going to quit this presentation and do it live. Let's hope this works. So I'm going to cockroachlabs.cloud/signup, and I will screen share that tab. Give me 1 second. There we go. So I'm on this page right now. I'm just going to enter an email address. So I'm just going to fill this form out. Simple, your usual thing. Okay, I'm not meeting the 12-character minimum. There we go. So I'll go verify my email, the usual. I'm sure you can, all of you can do this. All right, so let me switch tabs again. Okay, so it'll take you here. You can create a dedicated cluster, but why would you do that when the free cluster is forever free? So these machines, the free ones, you do not have to worry about managing nodes. You do not have to worry about where the nodes are living. They're all shared across a massive cluster that is both resilient because there are a lot of nodes in it, and you never have to worry about managing physical nodes. You just have to worry about the database and what you do with it. So I'll just click create your free cluster. Let the thing spin while it provisions the cluster for you. Okay, so it has created this. I'm gonna save this URL at the bottom here because it is gonna be important. It has my private password in there. So let me just open up a Notes app and save it there. And you're going to see some setup instructions here. Also, download this certificate file. This will be important to connect with your database from your application, as well as from any database configuration / management tool, which we will be using one of very shortly. OK, so now I have a database. It's called Shrill Moose. And there should be a user created for me already. Most of you can see this, right? It's not too small. OK, I'm not seeing any complaints. No complaints is a good sign. OK, let's keep moving. So next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to have you install this app called dbeaver. So there are many database management tools that you can use to connect with a database. You can just use our simple client, which is the Cockroach SQL client. And if you come back over here and click connect, it'll tell you how to do that. It'll tell you CockroachDB client. You can just take that and then download that binary and run it from a terminal. And it'll let you connect to your Cockroach Cloud cluster very easily. But it's OK if you're not very familiar with using a terminal. A lot of hackathon hackers aren't. So I'm going to go with the GUI approach, the graphical approach. And there are many GUI tools that work with CockroachDB. dbeaver is one that we generally support. So I'm just going to download it. Actually, I'm faking downloading it because I already have it. So I'm just going to open it. While dbeaver is opening, let me screen share dbeaver. So I have it open over here. I hope most of you can see it. OK, it seems like most of you can see it. I'm surprised that a few have questions so far. Yeah, so our request for cluster is being approved during this demo. Not yet. We have a bit of a delay in approving them. But let's say if you put it in right now, hopefully in the next 2 hours, you will get a cluster. By tonight, we should have almost everything submitted today approved. Yeah. Is there a syllabus? So there isn't a strict syllabus, but if you go to cockroach.ch/htn signup, which is also in the chat, you should be able to look at the slides. And the slides are doing exactly what I'm doing, so with screenshot instructions. So once you're here, you're going to click that to start a new connection. Oh, you know what? I'm just going to switch screen sharing to the whole window. Hope that works better. There we go. So I'm going to just select CockroachDB over here in my Connect to Database window. And I'm going to make my display smaller so most of you can see it. There we go. So I selected CockroachDB. I click New Connection. And now I need to put in all these settings over here. So I'm going to go back to my window, Connect. So if you click your tool, you are going to see username Bilal. I'm just going to copy these settings in here. Username Bilal. The password is the password component, the component after the username in my URL that I saved earlier. It's OK. I'm sharing this password on a live stream. I'm going to take down this cluster right after, so don't mess with it. Host, I'm just going to copy that. So that's going to go over here. The database. For the database, I'm going to copy it from here. The slides have better instructions on this, on which part of the URL takes in what and where you need to fill it from. So I'm just going to fill that in there. And then I need to go to the SSL tab. And I need to select Use SSL. And for a CA certificate, I'm going to select the certificate that I downloaded earlier. So that is this one. I think that should be it. I should just be able to hit finish. And now under Shrill Moose, I should be able to connect. There we go. I'm just going to delete this other one that I had earlier. Can I go over that again? So if you open the slides, then you should have the screenshots for each and every one of these steps if you want to go through it slower than I did. So now I'm connected to Shrill Moose. And I can see that it has two tables. It has two schemas under it, public and CRDB internal. I don't need to worry about that. The one thing I'll do, I'll click this and it opens a SQL editor. So don't worry about like everything that is created already, but think of it as like a blank slate. So now I'm gonna type my SQL queries here, and I can run them straight from here and see changes happen in the database. So let's start with creating. Let me look at what I had right here. So I've done all of this. So I'm going to create the customers table. So create table customers. There's ID, integer, primary key. This is the example I had earlier. There are going to be 4 columns. I think name, string, varchar stands for string, not null, because I always want the name to be present, and country. So that is the syntax for the create table statement, and it just creates a table with these columns. Why does ID say a primary key after it? It's because every row needs to have a unique ID, and this is a common structure for a lot of SQL tables. So I'm going to click that little play icon, and it's just going to create the table. If I refresh over here, I should see the table exist. Updated rows. OK, I think it's done. So now if I insert, the insert statement lets you insert rows into your newly created table. So if I do insert into customers, values, 1, let's say, I think I had an example over here. I'm going to run these 3 statements. So in SQL, you need to use single quotes, not double quotes. Double quotes means table name. Let's say we're building some sort of database of wrappers, great wrappers. So I'm going to run that statement, and then that inserted into that table. I'm going to run this again with a different wrapper, our own hometown hero, Drake, from Canada. These are countries, not cities. I'm not pretending Canada is a city. Let's also add just 3 examples from 3 different countries. Are there any questions so far? Nope. United Kingdom. So I've already run that statement, so I'm just going to select these and run that as well. So now those 2 statements have been run. Yeah, this like statement by statement running thing is a bit complicated, but basically that play button runs the statement that's selected, and that one selects the whole, runs everything that's here. Yeah, so now it seems like we have added 3 rows, and you can confirm that by running the select statement. The select statement is what it sounds like. It just returns rows from a table. So the simplest select statement just looks like this: select star from customers, and it should just return all the tables in the customers table, all the rows in the customers table. And it just looks exactly like I said earlier it would. Yeah, so that is your most simple SQL query. Why is there a star over here? The star basically means return all columns. And instead of star, I could do something like ID name, and then I would just get the ID and, oh, I don't need a parentheses here. I just get the ID and name columns, or I could just do just name, and then I only get the names. The other things you can do are filter statements, or like filter predicates, things like where ID equals 2, so you would only get ID equals true, so that's Drake. Or you could do something like where country is greater than Canada. I think that would select everything because Oh, okay. So it excludes Drake because Canada is not greater than Canada. This is just lexicographic sorting of strings. So U sorts after C. So you're only selecting for everything that is like ahead of that. That might be a bit confusing, but if you think of it this way, where ID is greater than 1, then this will make sense. So you're only getting that and that. I'm just going to return the whole thing so you get that. Yeah, so if this was confusing, I was just writing the statement at the top, running it, and then the results were coming at the bottom. I will get into client libraries right after this, but this is basically how you use SQL. Let me wrap up the SQL part of this real quick because I only have 6 minutes remaining. So the select statement lets you select. The next statement that you need to worry about is update. So update, let's say update customers. So update table name, set country equals Canada, where ID equals 3. Let's say Heady1 is coming over to do a collaboration with Drake. So let me just show the whole table. So that's how the table looks like right now. And then I'm going to run this update statement, and it's going to set that cell to Canada, where ID is 3, so for that row. So when I run this, it says 1 row updated, so I'm just going to select the whole table again, and that is how the table looks like right now. And finally, I'm just going to, let's say you want to delete a row entirely. So you can run the delete statement, delete from customers, where ID equals 1. So this statement is going to delete the row where ID equals 1. You could also do something like ID is greater than 1. So let me actually try ID is greater than 1. So it should delete 2 and 3. It says updated rows 2. I'll go back and run my select statement. And now you only see this. OK, so that is a very quick SQL primer. I would have loved to go in more detail, but most of you are probably interested in seeing how you want to use Cockroach in your own apps. So let me get into that real quick. One sec. I'm switching back to the presentation. OK, so thanks, Alishan, for answering questions, by the way. Yeah, we support the Postgres flavor of SQL. But we don't 100% support everything that Postgres does, but we support it enough that almost everything that you want to use works with it. OK, so we've done all of this. So how do you use CockroachDB in your application? So there are 2 general ways to incorporate any SQL database in your application. You could use a raw database driver where you would have to write queries like the ones we were just writing. You would have to write these in your application yourself. It appears a bit less clean because you are interspersing, let's say, a Python code or Ruby code or whatever with SQL queries right embedded within them. But the advantage is it is sometimes more performant, and it lets you craft queries yourself. If you like writing SQL, you may prefer just using a raw database driver. The other thing you could do is use an ORM, which is an object relational mapping. So in this example over here, you are seeing an example of using Sequelize, which is a JavaScript Node.js ORM. So the same query over here, select star from customers where country equals Canada, you are running the same thing, except you are using something that looks a lot more JavaScript-like. So your application looks a bit cleaner because you're basically just working in JavaScript if your application is in JavaScript. So let's say you are using Node.js. Cockroach supports the Postgres driver, PG, and it also supports the Sequelize ORM. You can go to our docs on examples on how to connect either of those with CockroachDB. Same thing with Ruby. We support Ruby Postgres driver, and we support the Rails ORM, which is also known as Active Record. There are examples for that in our docs as well. Same thing with Python. We support a whole bunch of drivers and a whole bunch of ORMs. So the PsychoPG2 driver for Postgres is also supported with Cockroach, and we support the 4 ORMs listed on there. Examples for all of those are also in our docs. Our docs team is excellent. They've done a lot of work on this. If I did not list your language in this presentation, we probably still support it. We support a lot of languages, a lot of drivers, a lot of ORMs. Go in our docs, and you will find out what we support and example code for all of it. Okay, if you like CockroachDB, if you think it's cool, well, come work for us. So we are a startup, well, not really that small anymore. We are 200 employees and counting. We were founded in 2015 by our founders who are listed over there, primarily based in New York City, but we have engineering offices in Toronto and SF, and we're growing and we're hiring. So intern applications for fall 2021 and beyond, as well as new grad applications for next year and beyond will be, well, at least for next year, will be opening up soon on our careers page. Yeah, since I'm running a bit short on time, I will jump straight to questions. Can you confirm if we support Android? We don't support Android directly because there is no, I guess, backend layer in between. You will have to like interact with us through some sort of, like, let's say Python backend, Node.js backend, something like that. Summer 2021 opportunities. Unfortunately, the ship on that has sailed for us, but stay tuned for other future terms. Yeah, thanks, Asghar, for answering that. Yeah, so this slide is all you need to take away from this. If you want to refer back to these slides, go to cockroach.ch/htn talk slides. Sign up for a free cluster, free forever cluster at cockroachlabs.cloud/signup. Or if you are not a Waterloo, Queens, or UOIT student, go to that other link, cockroach.ch/htn signup, and request a cluster from us. And if you have any questions, ask in our channel, which is Cockroach-Labs on the Hackathon or Discord. And the best hack that uses CockroachDB or Cockroach Cloud will win iPad minis for the entire team and be there on Sunday, January 17th, because we'll be judging those. Yeah. With that said, let's see what questions remain. Is it possible to set up RESTful APIs with CockroachDB? So you would have to build a REST API yourself or use a REST API framework, but your REST API can interact with CockroachDB, yes. So basically, this seems to be a common thread among the questions, but your API is going to be the layer that sits in front, and then the database is the layer that sits behind it. So you need both. You always need both. Okay, the questions have run dry. So thank you all for coming. What are the Postgres limitations? They're all very specific. I'd be surprised if you were to run into any of those limitations during the course of this hackathon. Yeah, with that said, thank you all for coming, and I'm excited to let's see what all you work on. I'm excited to judge all your hacks this weekend. Cool. Bye, y'all.